Pathways of Light. Sarah's Journey. Sarah was a young woman of 28 years old, born in a small town in the United States, surrounded by mountains and green fields. She always had a quiet and simple life, born into a loving family, with parents who worked as teachers, and a younger sister, Clara, who was the light of everyone's eyes. Sarah grew up believing that the world was full of good intentions and opportunities. However, Sarah's life took an unexpected turn when, at 25, she lost her parents in a car accident. The shock and pain affected her deeply. Clara, who was with her at the time of the accident, was physically fine but emotionally devastated. Sarah took on the responsibility of caring for her sister, and over the years tried to rebuild both their lives. Over time, Sarah began to distance herself from her own dreams, to focus on Clara's needs, without realizing that she was leaving an important part of herself behind. She was always optimistic, but the weight of responsibility and unresolved grief began to drain her energy and her view of the future. Everything changed when Sarah received a mysterious letter without a sender. Inside there was only a short message. "There is something more for you, Sarah. Don't be afraid to start over." The letter came as a sign. She felt a strange and inexplicable urge to move forward, but the fear of facing the unknown still consumed her. That's when her best friend, Mark, appeared. Mark had always been by her side since college. He knew the challenges Sarah faced and never left her alone. Seeing what the letter had caused in her, he encouraged her to make an important decision. "Sarah, you have the right to be happy. Do not hold on to the past. Life still has much to offer." Mark suggested that they take a trip to the coast of California, a place Sarah had always dreamed of visiting but never had the courage to go. He knew it would be the perfect opportunity for her to leave the past behind and reconnect with her own dreams. Sarah looked at Mark, hesitant. The idea of getting away from everything for a while seemed scary, but at the same time, there was something revitalizing about the proposal. She didn't know what to expect from the trip, but she felt that this would be a chance to rediscover herself, to find a way to move forward and reconnect with life. The trip was planned, and soon after, Sarah and Mark were on their way to California. The roads were long and open, and as the car drove through vast landscapes, Sarah began to realize how she was allowing herself to breathe again. The fresh air, the soft sun, and the infinite horizon seemed to invite her to leave behind the shadows of her everyday life. When they arrived at the small coastal town where they planned to stay, Sarah couldn't help but be impressed by the tranquility of the place. The view of the ocean was stunning, and the sound of the waves gently hitting the rocks seemed to calm her mind. In the first few days, Sarah spent a lot of time contemplating nature, walking along the shore, and reflecting on her life. She talked to Mark about her fears, her losses, and what it really meant to live a full life. "I feel so distant from myself," Sarah confessed on a quiet afternoon as they watched the sunset. "Like I've let time pass without really living. I don't know what I want anymore." Mark, with his characteristic calm, replied, "You're trying to find the right path, but maybe the only thing you need to do is take the first step, without worrying about the final destination." Sometimes happiness is in the journey, not in the arrival. These words touched Sarah deeply. She began to realize that she had gotten lost in the expectations of others and the obligations she had taken on. The dream of her own life, her own desires and needs had been left behind. It was time to reconnect with herself. One afternoon while exploring the city, Sarah and Mark came across a small art gallery. Sarah, always attracted to beautiful images and colors, decided to go in. The gallery was simple, but there was something charming about it. Among the paintings, one in particular caught her attention. It was a vibrant canvas that showed a young woman in a field of flowers, looking at the horizon as if she was about to embark on a new journey. There was something in that image that touched Sarah's heart in an inexplicable way. She approached the painting, fascinated by the way the artist had captured the feeling of hope and renewal. When Sarah looked at the name of the painter, her eyes widened. Clara Dawson. It was the same name as her sister. Confused and emotional, Sarah turned to Mark. This can't be a coincidence. The artist has the same name as my sister. Mark, noticing Sarah's unease, asked, "Have you ever heard of this Clara Dawson before?" Sarah shook her head. "No, never. But something inside me says this painting is a sign. Clara always had a unique way of seeing the world. Maybe she left something for me, something I need to understand." At that moment, Sarah felt a small shiver of emotion. There was something deeper, an unexpected connection between her and this unknown artist, something that was yet to be revealed. The discovery of the painting was like a small spark inside Sarah. She couldn't stop thinking about that work, and how somehow it seemed to connect with her own life and her sister's name. She began to question if art could be the key to something bigger that she couldn't yet understand. "Do you think this is a sign?" Sarah asked Mark as they sat in a cafe, with the painting still fresh in her mind. Mark, who had always known how to listen without judging, replied softly, "I don't know, but the fact that it moved you is already a sign. Maybe you need to explore this more." Clara always had a special way of leaving her marks on the world, and who knows, this mark might be for you. In the following days, Sarah found herself returning to the gallery more and more. She wanted to know more about Clara Dawson. The gallery was hosting an exhibition of the artist's works, and talking with the owner, Sarah discovered that Clara Dawson was not an anonymous artist, but rather a highly respected local painter who had moved to the city a few years before dying in a tragic car accident. The shock overwhelmed Sarah. She couldn't believe that Clara Dawson, the talented artist, was really her sister. But it didn't make sense. Her sister Clara had always been a joyful young woman, full of life and dreams. How could she have become an artist without Sarah knowing? With a heavy heart, Sarah went in search of more answers. She looked through the gallery's files, trying to understand what really happened to Clara. It was then that she found a letter written by her sister before her death. In the letter, Clara talked about the journey of self-discovery she was going through, about the internal struggle to find her own identity, away from everyone's expectations, and how art had become the means by which she expressed her emotions and vision of the world. The letter contained words that seemed too deep for Sarah to understand at the time Clara wrote them. Her sister mentioned a path of light, and that one day Sarah would be able to see beyond the shadows, to find her own truth. Sarah was speechless. She didn't know what to do with all of it. It felt like she was discovering a part of her sister she had never known, and at the same time, a part of herself that had always been hidden. Suddenly, it became clear to Sarah that the trip to California and Clara's painting were the beginning of a much larger journey than she had imagined. It wasn't just about escaping to find relief, but an opportunity to reconnect with her own path, to understand what her sister meant by path of light, and perhaps to discover a new purpose for her own life. As she walked along the beach at the end of that day, with the gentle wind caressing her face, Sarah felt a sense of renewal. It was as if she had finally found the key to unraveling her sister's story and at the same time her own. But in the midst of this revelation, something unexpected happened. When Sarah began to explore more about Clara and her life in the city, she found something that made her stop in her tracks. In one of the gallery folders, she found a photo of her sister from a few years ago, next to an unknown man. The man was smiling at the camera, with an expression of affection on his face, while Clara was visibly emotional, as if she were sharing an intimate moment. The man in the photo looked so familiar. Sarah took the photo to Mark, who looked at the image attentively. He's Jake, isn't he? Mark asked with a look of surprise. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Jake. The name seemed to echo in her mind. But how? Jake was Sarah's ex-boyfriend, someone she had lost contact with years ago after the accident. And now he was with Clara, her sister. The shock was too much for Sarah to process at that moment. With her heart racing, Sarah felt like the world was falling apart around her. Clara and Jake was something she would never have imagined. How could her sister have been involved with someone Sarah knew so well? She never imagined that something so deep was happening in her life, even when she was close to Clara. Everything was about to become even more complicated. The shock of discovering the relationship between Clara and Jake, combined with the discovery of the letter, left her with more questions than answers. Now Sarah needed to decide what to do with this new truth. How would she deal with the fact that her sister's past was deeply intertwined with her own? Sarah felt an internal turbulence she had never experienced before. The revelation about Clara's connection with Jake didn't give her peace. What should she do with this information? She was struggling to understand how her sister's life intertwined with hers in such an unexpected way. In the following days, Sarah distanced herself from the gallery and isolated herself a bit from Mark. While she tried to organize her thoughts, she spent hours on the beach, where she walked alone, feeling the cold wind and the sound of the crashing waves. The sea always calmed her, but at that moment, it seemed to reflect her internal confusion, her doubts about who she was and what her sister really meant to her. In one of these walks, Sarah remembered Clara's words in the letter. The path of light is the one you create for yourself. Do not wait for others to show you the way. It is inside you. Those words began to make more sense. She couldn't live in the shadow of the past, nor continue letting her sister's choices define who she was. It was time for Sarah to create her own path. But how could she do that? How could she move forward knowing about Clara's relationship with Jake? And even more, knowing that she had lost so much time trying to understand a distorted version of what she thought was her sister's life? It was then that she decided to seek one last conversation with Jake. She knew she would need to face the man who had been part of her past, even if the past was now a labyrinth of conflicting emotions. There was no more room for secrets. Sarah needed to understand what really happened between him and Clara, and what it meant for her. Jake was surprised to see her, but also seemed sad, as if he already knew that moment had come. "I knew you would come one day," he said, his voice soft and cautious. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I didn't know you still thought so much about me." "I don't know what to think now," Sarah replied, her throat tight. "Clara was with you, Jake. After everything that happened, why didn't you tell me?" Jake sighed, looking at the ground. "I understand that this is difficult, but our story is not simple. I didn't want to hurt you, Sarah. Clara and we got close in a different way. He had something you didn't know, something she never shared. I didn't know how to tell you everything. I felt lost, and when Clara came into my life, it was as if something was placed in my path." Sarah didn't know what to think. Jake's words were loaded with emotions, but they didn't seem complete. She felt he was trying to justify himself, but something inside her said he wasn't telling everything. She needed more. "Do you think all this was right?" Sarah asked, feeling the anger start to rise, but at the same time, a deep sadness enveloped her. "You and Clara, this destroyed me. Everything I thought I knew about my sister is now questioned. How did you expect me to deal with this?" Jake looked up, his eyes filled with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah, and now looking back, I see that I should have been more honest with you. Clara, she was always an incredible person, but she was lost in many ways just like I was. I loved her, but I don't know if it was the love you think it was." Sarah was silent for a moment, absorbing Jake's words. She was there, facing a painful truth, but she needed more than empty answers. She needed to understand why her sister made the choices she did, why she distanced herself from everyone, and why she and Jake had drifted apart that way. "I don't know what to do with all this, Jake," she said, the words coming out of her mouth with difficulty. "But I think in the end, I need to follow my own path. I can't carry the shadows of the past any longer." With that, Sarah walked away, leaving Jake behind, and walked down the street of the town. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. No matter what the future held, she was finally beginning to understand that what happened with Clara and Jake did not need to define her own journey. Sarah now knew that the path she needed to follow no longer went through the mistakes of the past, but through her own choices. Clara had guided her to this point, and with her heart still full of questions, Sarah felt she was finally ready to find her own answers. The path of light her sister mentioned was becoming clearer, but there was still something more to be resolved. Clara. She couldn't leave her sister in the past without fully understanding her life and motivations. Sarah needed to follow Clara's legacy somehow, not with regrets or hurts, but with the desire to build something positive, something her sister would have wanted for her. The day Sarah finally decided to go to Clara's old studio was a cloudy and cold day. She had waited for this moment for so long, but now as she approached the building, a whirlwind of emotions took over her. Clara's studio had been the place where her sister created many of her works, where shared memories lived, and where, in a way, the past of Sarah and Clara still lingered in the air. Sarah approached the door, her fingers trembling, hesitant, but at the same time feeling a strength within herself that she didn't know existed. She had decided she would no longer live under the shadows of her past or under others' expectations. Clara could no longer be her only reference. She needed to understand what her sister truly wanted for her, and what true freedom meant. That was what she hoped to find in the studio, a final clue that would help her understand Clara's journey and perhaps Sarah's own journey. When she entered the studio, a familiar smell of paint and wood filled the air. It was the place where Clara created her artworks. The walls were covered with some unfinished paintings, all vibrant and full of emotion. Looking at them, Sarah felt something changing inside her. It was as if each brushstroke, each color, told a part of her sister's story, a story she still didn't fully understand. Clara, with her intensity and passion, had left a legacy in each work, in every touch of her life. She walked through the room, her eyes fixing on the works, but something made her stop in front of a specific canvas. She recognized that painting. It was an abstract painting full of colors and shapes, but there was something very personal in that painting. In the center, a solitary figure, a woman, seemed to be on a winding path, but there was a light ahead. The woman in the painting looked like herself, lost and seeking redemption, but with hope on the horizon. Sarah approached the painting and, looking closer, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the edges of the canvas, there was a handwritten message, something Clara had probably written while on the brink of finishing the work. Find your own light, Sarah. Do not wait for me to guide you. The path is yours. Clara's words seemed to reverberate inside Sarah like an echo from the past. She stood there in front of the painting, absorbing the message, understanding something that had escaped her until that moment. Clara had always been an intense woman, full of complexity, but now she understood. Her sister wasn't trying to distance herself from her. She was trying to give her freedom. She wanted Sarah to follow her own path, without being burdened by the weight of a past full of mistakes and misguided choices. Clara wanted her to be happy. At that moment, Sarah realized that her journey was not about seeking answers in the past, but about building something for the future. She no longer needed to try to understand every part of Clara's life, or Jake's, or even everyone's around her. She needed to look at herself, her own needs, and seek what was right for her. But as she turned to leave the studio, Sarah was interrupted by a message on her phone. It was from Mark. Sarah, I was thinking of you. I understand if you need more time, but I want you to know that I am here for you no matter what. I feel there is something important between us. Sarah felt her heart race. He looked at the phone screen thoughtful. Mark was trying to get closer, trying to build something with her. And she knew she could no longer run from it. Love, friendship, trust, all the things she had kept for so long, all the things she wanted but didn't know if she deserved, were there in front of her in the form of simple words, but loaded with deep meaning. Sarah knew that the past could no longer dictate her choices. She could choose her own path now. What she would do with this love, with this trust, was her decision. She no longer needed to carry the weight of Clara's past, but rather build a new path, lighter, freer. The phone rang again. It was a message from Jake. I know you must be thinking about everything that happened. I wanted to apologize for all the wrong choices I made. And if you ever give me a chance, I would love to talk more about what happened. But for now, I just want you to know that I wish you the best. For you and your life. Sarah was silent for a moment. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to decide without fear. Sarah felt an unexpected peace in her chest as she walked towards the exit of Clara's studio. The soft afternoon light penetrated through the dusty windows, reflecting on the paintings as if the very environment was applauding her decision. There, among Clara's paintings and memories, she had finally found the clarity she had been seeking. The weight of years of confusion and guilt began to dissolve, and she felt lighter, as if an invisible cloak of shadows had been lifted from her shoulders. As she left the studio and breathed the fresh air outside, Sarah realized how the world around her seemed different. New York City, with all its rush, imposing buildings and constant sounds, now seemed more welcoming, less suffocating. What once seemed like a maze of chaos was now just the landscape of her own journey. She had accepted the freedom Clara had silently offered her through her words in the painting. As she walked through the city streets, Mark's message still resonated in her mind. He was there waiting, and maybe that was what she needed to take the next step in her life. She didn't need to have all the answers now, nor did she know if she would be able to forget what happened between her and Jake, but she knew she could move forward. She would choose what was best for her without regrets. Sarah entered a nearby cafe, seeking a moment of tranquility. She sat by the window with a cup of hot tea in her hands and watched the city's bustle. The city lights began to softly glow as the day turned into night, and Sarah felt a sense of renewal. The past could not be erased, but it no longer needed to define who she was. She was ready for what was to come next, knowing that, above all, she had control over her choices. She picked up her phone and, with a deep sigh, decided to reply to Mark. "I missed you too," she typed hesitantly, but it was the beginning of something new. She was taking the first step to open her heart again, without the expectation that everything would be perfect, but with the willingness to accept whatever came genuinely. At that moment, she saw Jake's response. He was still trying to reach a place of regret and reconciliation, but Sarah knew that now her priority was herself. She didn't need to seek approval, nor make more concessions for something that didn't make her happy. Jake needed time to deal with his own choices, and she needed space to make hers. The decision was made. She didn't need to take an impulsive action now, but she knew that, in time, she would be able to build a better future. What would happen with her and Mark or with her and Jake was not clear. What was clear was that, finally, she had learned to take the first step towards something new. For the sake of her own peace, she looked at the illuminated city in front of her, feeling ready to start again, to build something lasting, not from external expectations, but from what she truly wanted. Over time, Sarah reconnected with her passions and began to live according to her own choices. She dedicated herself to painting, something she had neglected for years, and finally made art a form of expression and healing. Her friendship with Mark strengthened, and with him she learned the meaning of patience and unconditional love. And although the journey of reconciling with the past was long, she never looked back with regret. Clara, even in her absence, remained an important part of her life. Her sister's words, etched in her memory, never abandoned her. With each brushstroke, each choice she made, Sarah felt Clara's presence like a comforting shadow, reminding her that true freedom comes when we accept our own path. New York, with all its complexities and challenges, was now a place where Sarah felt at peace, knowing that the future was an open space ready to be explored by her. And as she walked through the city streets, with Mark by her side and art in her heart, she knew that, finally, she had found her own place in the world, where hope and redemption met. Sarah's path was just beginning, but now she knew that, regardless of the obstacles ahead, she was ready to move forward, with courage, freedom, and the confidence that she deserved to be happy.